Actually, that part was pretty easy for me. It was just talking to my mom and dad. They're kind of a faithful family, so they were both thrilled and a little bit surprised because I've never thought of myself as very religious. My parents have never thought of themselves as very religious, and so it wasn't terribly hard, but just more of a surprise in terms of my experience.
For me, it was a little bit different because I'm an only child. So at first, my mom was very supportive, but my dad was kind of like, was pretty skeptical about the whole situation. He was like, well, why do you want to do that? He's like, you know, I want to have grandkids and all this stuff. He would joke around, but I could tell he was being serious. But after a while, he kind of warmed up to the idea and he said, oh, well, maybe this would work. Maybe, you know, I guess all those students that you might have or all the people in the parish are kind of like your spiritual children. They're kind of my spiritual grandchildren. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of those people out there. But, you know, they kind of warmed up to the idea and now they're very supportive.
I was already teaching at the time and going to church, kind of just to hold base, I guess, just to hold on to something solid, living away from family. And so when I told my mom that it was really weird, and I can explain it later, but when I eventually explained it to her that I thought I might be called to the priesthood, she said, are you sure? Because I was pretty much an outgoing, enjoyed going dancing with my friends, loved just having a big social life, and the priesthood for her was very different from what she would imagine me being. And so she said, are you sure? And I said, no, but I need to keep exploring this. And so she kept praying with me on that one.
I had just come back from a year in Paris, and my vocation discernment, which I had unfortunately kept to myself for my life, had reached its culmination. And one day after dinner, I worked myself up to saying to my parents that this is what I thought I wanted to do. And my mother immediately yelled out, no! And my father, after a few moments, wisely asked, are you sure about this? He asked a very good question, are you running away from something else? And I said, no, I think I want to do this, and I'm going to go to the Basilian Fathers because that's whom I've known through high school and university. Not until 7 years later, at my ordination reception, when the family asked, so Jeff, how did you know you wanted to be a priest? And I told the story, and they asked my mother, why did you scream no? And I learned that she couldn't finish the sentence. She said what she meant was, no, it's actually happening. Because apparently, I found out she had been praying for this.
This whole business about telling parents, I was living in a different city when I was discerning as an undergraduate, and we had, in fact, I'd gotten as far as to get the associate application form, and of course one of the requirements is your parents' proof of marriage. And so that was sort of the motivation. And I remember going back to Calgary, and they were actually dead. And they were knocking at the door, and they think, well, what? And I said, I need your marriage license. And they said, oh, why? And I said, well, I've decided to join the Basilians. And of course, my family doesn't know the community. And of course, the classic mistake, Brazil, Basel, you know, the order in Saskatoon. And my mother asked about 10 questions, and my father didn't say anything at all. And then when my mother finally stopped, my father said, I'll get it for you tomorrow. Good night. That was the end of it.
Well, as many of you know, I have a twin brother, and I remember a line from my dad, because telling my parents was fairly easy as well. Growing up, my twin brother, he hardly went to church, and I was always in church, and doing whatever. And my dad made a comment. He said, well, one of them you can hardly get into church, and the other one you can't get them out of church. But it was my mother who had a hard time accepting the news because she wanted grandchildren. Even though she had like 20 at the time, but she wanted grandchildren.
My father wanted me to go to college first, or at least have a year or two of college. And I said, no, I want to go right away. And he said, well, let's go talk to Father McGee, who was the principal at St. Thomas. So we made an appointment and went to see Father McGee and put this question to him: should I join right now or go to college first? He said, you should come right now, so you'll be higher in precedence. So that was all my father needed. And he wrote to me every week when I was in the novitiate. I was really impressed with it.
So that was important to your dad, or at least that was a value for your dad as well.
Yeah, well, he was very supportive. He really was. Well, so was my mother, for that matter.
So I think the harder thing for me was not telling my family, was telling friends, because I think there was a desire to kind of be cool or to kind of be normal in one of the guys, and so somehow I was more afraid of telling my friends, insofar as that somehow I would either be perceived as telling them that I was holier than them or had some special calling or something like that. So my difficulty wasn't so much telling my family, because I thought, it made sense, I thought, for my mom and dad, from what I was doing. It was a little bit more anxious for me to tell my friends and how they might perceive me, like somehow the things that we found funny would now no longer be funny, or that I couldn't hang around with girls, or that I didn't like girls, or all that stuff. So for me, it was a much more nuanced question for me, how to tell friends than how to tell family.